Hi there, I'm James Osborne, the co-founder of the Recruitment Network, and this is the TRN Podcast. Every week, we unpack the strategies, the technologies, the processes and mindsets fueling today's top-performing recruitment agencies. We take a look behind the scenes of some great recruitment businesses. We listen to the real-life stories of those who have built those businesses, and we learn from some of the industry's greatest thought leaders to help you become both future fit and future relevant. So let's begin with this next episode of the TRM Podcast. Let's talk about change. Obviously, that's what we're here to sort of talk about at the moment. You refer a lot in some of the stuff that you talk about the 5 foundations of change. What are these 5 foundations? Can you sort of walk us through them? And
Yeah, absolutely.
how do they typically sort of show up in a business?
So I guess I'll start by taking a step back and explain why I think they're important now. I deliver a number of keynotes and workshops around leadership and culture, and this is by far one of the most popular, and I think it's one of the most popular because, to the point you mentioned in your introduction, that we're going through a period of seismic change with AI, and I think it's a genuine inflection point in business and in society, and also in our own individual relationship with technology. I have the pleasure of facilitating the World AI Festival in Cannes, and I've done it for the last 4 years. And if even a tiny proportion of what is spoken about on that stage comes to fruition in the next 5 years, the way we see business and society and our relationship with tech in 5 years' time will be so dramatically different from what it is now. So that massive technological transformation, revolution, if you like, it requires a leadership and cultural transformation to ensure its success in business. And it's my belief that there's no digital without cultural transformation, and there's no cultural transformation without leadership transformation. So to take on these seismic challenges, and they're not just AI, the global warming, there's huge challenges around the global talent war that we have, people able to travel wherever they want. Lots and lots of challenges in business that make this a really defined inflection point. And although we've always had challenges in business, I think when you look at the size, the scale, the speed, and the multiplicity of those challenges, they both feel bigger and actually are bigger. So my 5 foundations of change, they're as a result of the work I've done with the Institute, the new P&L Institute, but also those 250 odd entrepreneurs, global thought leaders, academics, business leaders that I've spoken to on the podcast. In terms of what those 5 transformational champions of change foundations are, the first is self-awareness and leadership. And it sounds simple and it sounds obvious, but actually it's a real challenge in leadership to have that conscious self-awareness. And everything has to start with self-awareness and leadership, because without leaders who are prepared to look at themselves in the mirror, not a lot changes within an organization. As you alluded to in your introduction, we can't just pull people up with us. We have to empower people, and that comes from a greater sense of self-awareness and that balance of power. The second foundation is principled purpose. There's a lot of fluff around purpose. There's an industry that's grown up around it. But actually, I think when you get it right and you communicate it right and people understand what the core impact of that business is, it's one of the greatest strategic assets a leader has at their disposal within their organization, because you coalesce people around a common sense of purpose and vision. The third is a culture of curiosity. So giving that freedom, that permission to explore, to innovate, but also building a framework to ensure you can sustain that curiosity, creativity, and innovation within your business. I do another keynote called "Are We Outsourcing Our Curiosity to an Algorithm?" And in that I explore the way AI is changing the way we think and the way we do things and our essence of our curiosity. So I think we need to, as we move into the age of AI, to ensure we're really conscious about how we drive curiosity and creativity in business. The fourth foundation is a transformational ecosystem. So that's how we wrap the operational element to that business around these other foundations. 4 key elements of that: turning on the intergenerational knowledge tap, bringing those 5 generations of business, 5 generations of people that are in business at scale for the first time ever together in a non-hierarchical way. Contextual critical analysis, ensuring people all have a voice within that organization. Creating those active belonging rituals. We're often very good at bringing people on board. We're not very good at ensuring that they continue to feel a part of an organization, and that collective courage that will come out of those other 3. And then the last foundation, the 5th foundation, the building of a powerful legacy. how we build businesses that are bigger than just ourselves, bigger than our own self-interest, how we coalesce again people around that legacy, leaving that organization in a better place than you found it. So self-awareness and leadership, principled purpose, culture of curiosity, transformational ecosystem, and a powerful legacy.
How do you create that culture of curiosity, I suppose, where people feel it's okay to be curious and it's okay to challenge the norm within the business? Because some people are quite nervous to do so.
Absolutely. Firstly, it has to be modeled by leadership. So leaders have to be open enough to ask the questions, to demonstrate that they're also trying to find the answers, to creating frameworks within a business, whatever that looks like, to encourage curiosity. When I do some of my workshops, one of the points I continually make in terms of engaging a process for curiosity is what I call stop bidding the best ideas. So if we think about a brief comes into an organization, whatever that brief happens to be, we bring a team together to respond to that brief. And we go into a boardroom, sit around that boardroom, let's say 5 or 10 of us, and we come up with 20 ideas to respond to that brief. And over that next hour or two, we refine them down into 2 or 3 ideas to take forward. We assign the responsibilities, we pat each other on the back, and we walk out the boardroom door to deliver those 2 or 3 ideas in response to the brief. What we do every single time, and I see it time and time again with the organizations I work with, we leave those other 17 ideas that just because they were not right for right now does not mean they're not right forever. But we leave those 17 ideas in the boardroom on the post-it notes, and they literally and figuratively get dumped in the bin. If we can find a way, and there's lots of different ways to do this, but find a way for your organization that curates those 17 ideas, brings them out into the organization. They could be used as teasers or starters for the next brainstorm. They could be relevant in 6 months' time when markets change. People look at them with fresh eyes. All sorts of things change within a business that will make that idea that wasn't right for right now, right for the future. So it's about recognizing that everyone has an idea to contribute within your organization. How can you extract that in a way that makes people feel comfortable, that they revisit them, that they get excited by their creativity, that they feel empowered by it?
Is there a risk, Paul, that some organizations go through a change process because they're a bit bored
Yes.
and just want to keep doing new stuff, as opposed to, we're doing change because it just feels that we should probably change, as opposed to, because we often talk a lot to people about stick to your knitting, stick to what you're really bloody good at and stop reinventing the wheel and just be damn good at it. Is there an argument that some organizations change too much and actually don't need to, and actually they're probably changing for change's sake as opposed to because it's required in the business?
Yeah, I think it comes back to often basic human behavior, and you read about something in the market or you see competitors changing, you feel you need to change as well. But it's that old adage, where you start with a transformation project will determine where you end up. So if you're about to engage in any sort of change, transformation project, start by asking those really basic conversations. What we're about to do, how will it make our business better? How will it make our people better? How will it make our performance and productivity better? And then when you've answered those 3 questions, where's the evidence to support it? If you're implementing AI, for argument's sake, an AI tool, how is it going to make the business better? How will it make the people better? How will it make the performance and the productivity better? Where's the evidence to support it? And it's got to be all of those things. Because if it's only changing one thing, it might make people better, but it might not improve their productivity. It might make the business better, but it might disillusion the people, the employees in the process. So all of those things will eventually fail because you haven't addressed all of those 3 questions. And then when you've answered those, again, a really simple set of questions. Why are you trying to change? What are you trying to change? How does it align with the ambition of the business? Is what you're trying to change even possible? What are the blocks, the barriers in the road to doing that? And what are the specific mechanisms to overcome them? How do we bring people with us? And how do we communicate that change? So much of change fails because we don't communicate it effectively, because we don't bring people with us, because we make certain assumptions about what they understand and what they don't, and because we often communicate in a microcosm. If we take AI again, you might have a leader in an organization saying to their staff, this AI tool is going to be the best thing ever for our business. But then everywhere else, those employees are hearing AI is going to take their jobs. So there's no context to that positioning within the organization. So think about the context to that communication and how consistently we do it.
Well, that was going to lead into my next question, really, which is about why these change initiatives fail. Because obviously, we sit down in the boardrooms, we map out that there's an opportunity here to make a better business, make better people, make people more productive, etc., 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 which is fantastic. But change often does fail. It often just doesn't work. There's a lot of intent, there's investment, there's
Yeah.
time, resource, and it often does fail. It just doesn't quite land as it should do, and then we get sort of, I suppose, disillusioned with the idea of change, and maybe we just go backwards. You touched on one, which is around communication. Why else do transformation initiatives and change fail in organizations in your experience?
So there's a really interesting report that perhaps some of the audience wants to check out. I think McKinsey 2021, I think it was, found that 70% of transformation projects fail, and actually half of those fail in the planning phase. They don't even get to implementation. So part of it is intent and the genuine nature of that intent. It plays to your previous question: how serious are you about transformation? You've also got to commit to that investment. Transformation takes time. You can't do it with a budget in one quarter. It takes a long time to change a culture, to improve it, to evolve it. It's taken a long time to get it to where it is, so it's going to take a long time to evolve it further along. Change is really hard work, and I think that's another perhaps basic assumption that sometimes leaders think, well, if we're going to change, we're going to transform, everyone's going to buy into it, it's going to be great. But actually, it's really hard work. But so is managing decline. So we all have a choice in business. Either we manage growth and transformation, or we manage decline. Only one leads to success. I think it is so much comes down to that communication piece again, the three C's of communication when we're looking at change: the clarity of the communications we have. How clear are we about why we're changing to our audience, to our employees? What is the impetus for change? The consistency of communication. We can't have one all hands meeting in June and then expect everyone to get that this is going to be a 9 to 12 and 18-month transformation process. How do we keep that consistency going? And then, to my earlier point, the contextualizing of that communications. Don't do it in a microcosm, and don't also assume that everyone's going to buy into it. Most people come to those all hands meetings with the memory of the last 5 CEOs who made huge promises about something and then ran out of enthusiasm or investment or time, or saw something else sparkling. So they don't come with a neutral position. They come with a lot of skepticism. So how do we bring them into neutral before we take them into that positive approach or positive embrace of transformation?
And to Ria's question in the chat, she does, what extent should leadership share early stage changes with the business? When's the right time to do so? So, I mean, how much information do we need to give people across the business, and how regularly and how early do we need to be giving it? Because I have a concern in some organizations. I see there's almost too much democracy going on. There's too much like, we're thinking of change. What do you all think? And then the next thing you know, you spend the next 6 months discussing whether change should happen or not, and before you know it, change isn't actually passed because the world's moved on. So, at what point do you start communicating this change to your staff? How early?
I mean, that does depend on the organization and what the level of change is and how it's going to affect employees. So there's probably not a singular answer to that. But to sort of give an answer, I think when you announce that change in whatever stage you're going to do it, I think another mistake that leaders perhaps sometimes make is that team sat around a boardroom, as you say, for 3 months, and they've had deep discussions for 3 months, but then they stand up for 20 minutes and expect everyone to understand again all of the context that surrounds it. So it's less about the time that you announce that change, but more about wrapping the whys and the hows and what that means for people, and the old cliche of putting yourself in those shoes. If someone is listening to this and they're an account executive or a recruiter or an administrator, what does that mean for their role? Not just what does it mean for your role and your business, but how is it going to impact on them? I think that lack of self-awareness, again, to the first foundation, is one of the key issues with the transformation processes that fail, that leaders just don't put themselves in the shoes of those that the transformation is going to impact on.
It's interesting, actually. I'll give you a quick example of that. So when I used to work in Australia, and I remember as a business, we were a part of a big global business, and we decided to go through a complete rebrand, and it was quite a significant rebrand for us. And we wanted to try and explain to the members of the staff how we came to the brand that we came to. And I remember we hired out this beautiful hotel, and we invited everyone in the morning to come into a room. And in the room basically was all our existing brand, our old brands, with the reasons why we had it and the histories and the stories and sort of everything else that we had. Then we took them through this corridor, and the corridor literally was our thinking. So we had these images of how we went our thinking from where we are today to where we want to get to. And you come into
Nice.
the other room. The other room was the new brand. It's the first time they've ever seen it. And it was so brilliant because it really literally demonstrated why we were, how we got to where we got to, why we got there, and what our thinking was about.
Yes. Yeah.
So when people enter that second room, they go, I get this. It just sort of makes sense. So I love that concept of trying to articulate the journey of thinking that we came to then implement the change as opposed to anything else. So that works really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things you talk a lot about is this thing called permission-led leadership, and I'm really interested in that because I don't think I'm a particularly good leader. I say this to a couple of my staff on the call. I don't think I'm a particularly good manager or a particularly good leader. I think there's definitely gaps in my armory that I'm very comfortable with. What does it mean to be about permission-led leadership? How's that actually work in practice? And in particular, I'm really interested in sort of high-performing cultures and high-performing environments. So just talk me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, permission-led leadership, it really means giving expressed permission for people to feel empowered, for people to use their creative thinking, their curiosity, for people to take those decisions at whatever level they happen to sit at. And I think we have to be explicit in leadership about how we give permission for that. But I think there's also a lot of lip service given to, we're a really creative organization, we're really non-hierarchical. There's lots of things on walls and websites about what an organization claims to be, not so much in the hearts and minds always of those employees. So how do we ensure that and build a framework again that if people put those ideas forward, they fail? What does that mean within that organization? How are those people supported rather than reprimanded? Because if we claim to be a creative and innovative industry, we give permission for that empowerment, for that curiosity, for those people to make decisions. No one makes those decisions right 100% of the time, not a leader, not an employee. So the real demonstration of permission-led leadership, I think, is how we hold on to those people when they make those mistakes, how we ensure that we all learn from it, but they're able to make it confidently, learn, move on, grow, succeed again. But I think that's where the real demonstration of an organization who is committed to permission-led leadership is, how they handle those who have been given permission, been given empowerment, make a decision, perhaps get it wrong. What happens next within that organization? How are they supported rather than reprimanded?
Any final words of glorified expertise and value from the world of rugby or from leadership that you would give to someone? So now imagine you've got a small business owner. I've got 10 staff, small business.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm just trying to figure out things right now. And I need to get people really fired up, high performing, but going through a change process. What would be your sort of final parting words for them?
I guess don't be overwhelmed and think everything has to change tomorrow. You can start small, maybe do a pilot project within one division, one department, one area. If it's AI, for example, asking those really fundamental questions: what will AI improve potentially within our organization? What could AI potentially replace? And what should AI not touch? Because within every organization, there'll be areas where it will dramatically improve productivity, some areas and human productivity, some areas where it may replace elements of it, could be contracts or something else. But there will also be areas that are, particularly in recruitment, that are fundamentally human, that relationship development, the continuing to building. So even asking those really basic questions, as I've alluded to several times in this conversation, get the strategy right from the outset. And it comes back to curiosity. All strategy is context dependent, and all context is curiosity dependent. When you develop any strategy within an organization, you have to take account of the context that sits around it. If you're going into a new market, growing the business, whatever it looks like, context invites and involves in that strategy. But the more curious you are, the broader the context is, the more you understand. So again, going back to that, the really essence of who we are as humans, that's our natural sense of curiosity. When I deliver this keynote, just as a final point, I always test all my new keynotes on my children. They're teenagers, and they're more brutal than any audience I've ever had. And there's a slide that I have where I talk about curiosity being the essence of creativity, and creativity being the essence of innovation. And when I presented it to the kids, my son said, "Curiosity is like the seed, and the more you nurture that seed, and the more you create a great environment for it, and water it, and give it the right nutrients, then the greater the plant will grow. And the plant is creativity. And the stronger the plant, the more it will flower or blossom. And the innovation is the blossom, the flower. So everything in business starts with curiosity, nurturing that curiosity, giving it the right environment, giving it the right nutrients and watering it. The stronger the curiosity seed is, the greater the plant will be, the stronger the plant will be, and the stronger the innovation will be. So strategy is context dependent, context is curiosity dependent, and curiosity feeds creativity, which feeds innovation, which drives business success.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the TRN Podcast. Thank you for listening. And make sure you grab the free episode toolkit. All the links are in the description. And click follow in your podcast app so you can get notified of our next episode. If you want to get more out of your business and your people, then please unlock 30 days from our platform, TRN World, for free. And help yourself to all our training content, our guides, our templates, and peer insights. You can get started at trnworld.com/trial. And finally, if you found this episode of the TRN Podcast of use, please share it with your network and tag TRN on any socials with your takeaways. Otherwise, message us directly if we can help in any way. We do reply to every question. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on the next TRN Podcast.